One of the major questions that we get all the time is how quick should my store be? Is my store slow? Is it too slow? How much are we losing revenue here because our store is not loading in 2 seconds? Now, there's a lot to site speeds to understand. But to make it simple, what we can do is simply benchmarking. So looking at where some of these big stores are and how does this client store compare to these stores. And from there, we can start putting these numbers and benchmarks into perspective in terms of how good, how bad is the situation, and what might we be able to do about it. Generally speaking, Shopify and the speed assessing sites give very bad ratings. So you might be surprised here that even the bigger stores have sort of issues when it comes to these ratings, but they are still selling loads and loads of products. So maybe these issues are not as major as they seem. So let's jump into benchmarking and then we'll show how it's done. All right, here we are with the benchmarking sheet, and I'm going to show you how we actually did it very shortly. The idea is, let's look at the top 10 Shopify stores and see how they actually perform in the site speed benchmarking. So what we simply did is look at the mobile speed performance for different product pages. So these are some of their best selling product pages, at least from what we can tell. And then looking at it through a tool called GTmetrix. So what we're looking at is mobile and unthrottled as a connection. So this should provide us with the fairest view possible in terms of how quick these stores actually are. And while we're loading the result, now would be a great time to like the video, subscribe to the channel, because we have a ton of great e-commerce content coming up every Thursday. So you do not want to miss out on this. You will make more money by doing it. So help your future self to be better as an e-commerce merchant. So now that is out of the way, let's jump into this one. So we have Fashion Nova, and we can see, for example, that their performance is 25%. They're getting a score of F, which in the scale means that this is a fail. Although this is one of them, if not the biggest store on Shopify right now. Not only the biggest fashion store, but the biggest store overall. So just a reminder for the viewers, what these scores actually mean. When you get an F in school, it means that you failed. And it's done. Like that's the lowest score you can get. And the biggest store gets the lowest score. So that's a bit of a weird thing on this rating. I've loaded a couple of others as well. Let's take a look at the Gymshark. So this is their Gymshark biggest page here from a performance perspective. So this is the Lighthouse performance score. So this is essentially the Google version of the performance, how Google sees it. It's 35% and an F. Here it was 25% and an F, so slightly better, but not much. So again, it would go this category of 59 wouldn't be needed to not fail. It's 35%, so it's not even close. And here, Sanrio, on their Hello Kitty page, board games, gets a D. So we are talking like close to fail right now, so slightly better there. But they're definitely not very convincing. And if you were these clients, you might look at this as a very bad sign. So let's look at the benchmarking, because it gives this a little bit of a data-driven view. So here we are, and there's various different scores here on the benchmarking sheet. So let me just explain these away. So the GTmetrix performance score is the performance score that we just looked at. So this is essentially the Lighthouse performance score. So how Google sees the page speed performance. And we look at this from this perspective. Sanrio was actually the best one out of the bunch. The best one that we have on our current benchmarking. And then it goes all the way down to 2%. And out of curiosity, Gymshark was there in the middle. And Fashion Nova there also in the middle. Next up is the GTmetrix structure score. So this is how they explain it. So structure score is your proprietary assessment of Lighthouse and custom GTmetrix audits. So this is basically how well the page is built. So where performance takes into account the server side as well, this doesn't. So it's about the page build. And here, these stores do perform better, but still pretty poorly. And from a performance perspective, there shouldn't be anything holding this store back from Shopify's end. So they should also perform well on the performance, but they just don't. Next up, let's look at that then. So here we get a pretty consistent performance scores overall. So anywhere from 83 to 63. And one thing you can notice here that it's a little bit of an anomaly is the Body Candy, where they get a 2% performance score and 67% on their own. By the way, I would highly recommend that as you watch this video, you will test this on your end as well. So the way to do it is simply take out the mobile settings on GTmetrix and run it for any mobile device and unthrottled. So the test is at gtmetrix.com, and from there you have a drop down for the analysis options. And that way you can actually benchmark your site live with us today. Next up, we have the page size. So how much there is to load overall on this page. We have anything from 11.4 on this clothing store to then Zippo's very lightweight page at 1.7 megabytes. One thing to note here is that a light page from a page load perspective does not guarantee a high performance score, and vice versa to some degree as well. So you can see 1.7 megabytes, still 26% on that page. So this is as simple as it gets from a Shopify perspective. It's actually probably people would say it's quite an ugly page, but it's definitely lightweight at least. And if you want to follow at home what we are doing here, you can go to the waterfall report and scroll all the way down, and then you will be seeing the page size here. So use the compressed one. It's going to be this left one here, because that's how it is for the user. And also on the left hand side here, there's a number of requests, which is what we're going to look into next. So here, number of requests for these different stores. And these requests are the amount of times that it takes from your browser to request different files. So it's almost like going to a waiter and asking for an order, and then like pinging back and forth. The waiter comes and like brings you the stuff that you're requesting. So that's the page load. It's the simplest way I can explain it, at least. And typically these can also be pooled, so you can request multiple different things at the same time. But the one thing we note here is that there's a lot of requests for many of these stores. They tend to be very high on these. And this has been a trend overall. The stores are getting more complicated and a bit heavier as well. So this has gone up, but our average was very high at 365. Of course, it's probably weighted up a little bit by a couple of heavy hitters here, but that's still the nature of averages, is that it is an average. So far on the average department, we have the 29% performance score, 70% GT structure score, 6.3 on the base size, and 365 on the number of requests. What we then do is we do this for our clients to help them understand how they are doing and benchmark it against these items. And here we have a bunch of these benchmarking sheets. So this is by no means the only one. It's just the one that I'm sharing here. But getting this data and understanding where you stand can bring a lot of clarity in understanding whether it is an opportunity or not and how much should be invested into it. So for example, here we can see that this particular client has some performance issues, at least when it comes to GTmetrix scores. So this might be an opportunity for us to look into it and think if there's some possibilities there. But then on the other hand, we are doing very well on these other ones, at least compared to the average. And these should be the best of the best stores, as they are the biggest stores. So there's a lot of evidence here that this is not such a huge problem. Last tool that we used was the Shopify analyzer. So it's on this URL, analyzespeedbooster.com. And from here, using mobile, you can input your site to give a little bit of an overall score. big fan of using two sources for data because it can ensure that there's less errors and also gives more of an objective picture. So even if you score badly on one tool, you still have your second chance and you might score well on the second tool. And then it's worth investigating further. Unlikely that both would randomly be bad. So it gives us that security. And there's definitely a correlation between some of these scores and the GTmetrix ones. This last tool looks at it only from the Shopify perspective. So there, if you don't have a Shopify store, then this might not be very valuable to you, as some of these images, for example, might be rendered a little bit differently. And here we are with the results. Now, these might vary a little bit over time, as these stores might change their page weights, like some different compressions, etc. They should be fairly stable. So here's Fashion Nova on their store, and they're getting the F score also from Speed Booster, so 59 out of 100. Main issues, page weight, and this also outlines it here with the question mark of what they are expecting. Gives a little bit of an idea where the opportunities might be. And there, a good Shopify perspective from this one. So we're checking out as well as a tool and gives you that second opinion. I like to have one that is more general, so the GTmetrix one, and then comparing it from a bit of a Shopify perspective, because then you kind of have these two angles that you are understanding the performance. Now, we have also provided a little bit of a graphical overview because these numbers are a tiny bit difficult to understand sometimes. So here's our benchmarking when it comes to these stores. So as you see on the blue, we have the GTmetrix performance score, and then we have the structure. You could add like more data here, but we wanted to keep it fairly simple. And as we saw from the video, the structure tends to be fairly stable. So there's not that much there, but the performance really is quite all over the place with these ones. Benchmark is the average scenario. So there you have it. So for example, SIBO in this kind of case is very, very close to average, almost exactly how it is. If you like this kind of benchmarking, I would highly recommend you subscribe to the channel. And if you are already having some success with your Shopify store, you can go to growgurus.com, where we help mostly 6- and 7-figure e-commerce stores get the most out of their existing traffic. So conversion rate, average order value, lifetime value improvements. You can check out our front page to see if that would be a good fit for you, and vice versa for us as well. And then check out if you want to click here and apply to become a client. That's all for today, and I will see you in the next videos. Cheers!